So the transfer of agreements and contracts with the existing business is a very important concern when selling a business. When assets are purchased, the entity doesn't continue with those assets. So there's a new contracting party if those contracts are to continue. So those contracts and agreements need to be reviewed carefully to consider the party's rights when the entity is no longer the one in the contract with that original party. There can be severe consequences put into those contracts if the parties in fact change. On the other hand, when just stock is being sold in a company, the entity continues in existence. And so those harsh provisions that are drawn into contracts aren't triggered when the entity continues to be the contracting party. One of the most commonly overlooked provisions that I see in purchase agreements is how to allocate that purchase price that's being paid to the seller. And what I mean by that is, for example, there's $1 million purchase price for the business. How's that $1 million going to be allocated, especially for tax purposes? There's probably some real estate involved with the business, some inventory, some other hard assets, cash in the bank. There's all kinds of assets involved with that purchase. And it's important from a tax standpoint how to allocate that purchase price, because each of those different assets are going to have a different tax rate when it's reported on the next year's tax returns. So if you can allocate that purchase price towards the low tax areas for yourself, it can save significant taxes when it comes time to report that sale in the following year. So when purchase agreements are commonly drafted, there is a requirement from the date of the purchase agreement to closing that business has to continue to operate in the normal course of business, and in other words, in a profitable manner. And that requirement's important because the buyer doesn't want to buy a business that they thought they were buying that was really valuable, when in fact by the time the closing date comes, the sellers have taken all the cash and inventory out of the company. So it's important that that company continue to operate in the normal course of business and continue to operate in a profitable manner. For example, one of the things I've seen in the past is inventory not being replenished. So the date of the purchase agreement, the inventory may be high, but by the time the closing date comes along, there's hardly any inventory left. And that can have a significant decrease in the value of that business that the buyer didn't bargain for. One way that this problem can be addressed is to have an adjustment of the purchase price as a value of the inventory that's left over as of the date of closing. You know, it may be that the purchase agreement is entered into with a specific value named, but then the day before closing, the inventory is in fact valued and the purchase price is adjusted accordingly.